Welcome to Autism Knows No Borders, a podcast where people connected to autism inspire change and build community. Together with the Global Autism Project, I'm your host, Rachel Harmon, a professional with over a decade of experience in the field of autism services, outreach, and advocacy. Have you ever struggled to empathize with someone who experiences the world very differently from you? Maybe because you don't share an interest or even a first language with them. If so, you'll want to listen to this episode, which is part 2 of my conversation with Brian Middleton. He talks about how a lack of mutual understanding between autistic and non-autistic people can lead to breakdowns in communication. Brian Middleton is an autistic self-advocate, a board-certified behavior analyst, and the creator of The Bearded Behaviorist, an initiative dedicated to the dissemination of behavior science and the inclusion of trauma-informed care standards in applied behavior analysis and other human services. This conversation was part of a special event for our community of SkillCorps volunteers. Other participants include Danielle Terrell, Hannan-Bruecken, Shannon Haynes, Marianne Spiotta, Hailee Perez, and Christina Cairoli. In this conversation, among other things, we discuss the double empathy problem, the unfair expectation for autistic people to adapt to non-autistic communication, how Brian created an adventure room for his students to take a break and feel safe, where the terms neurodiversity and neurotypical originated, neurodiversity affirming as an attitudinal approach, and acceptance and commitment therapy. In this episode, discover what's possible when empathy is a two-way street. And now I present you Brian Middleton. So speaking of paradigm shifts, I think this might be a good transition to talk about the double empathy problem. So Brian, could you explain the double empathy problem? This was Damian Milton.
Yep. So the double empathy problem, in simple terms, it's autistics are often we have a different ways of expressing ourselves and interpreting social cues compared to non-autistic people. I would say that we can go even broader and say different neurotypes have different ways of expressing, but when we're talking about it within the context of autism and the double empathy problem, which is what it was originally coined for, it's autistics and non-autistic, so autistic, allistic. Non-autistic people have trouble understanding and empathizing with autistics because of our communication style. This lack of mutual understanding leads to a breakdown in communication that results in social interactions between those two groups not going well. But unfortunately, the problem is one-sided because the expectation is the autistic needs to change their communication to meet the allistic communication style, and it's not two-way. So the double empathy problem refers to both sides need to have empathy towards each other because there's differences, and empathy is an understanding of, like, I don't necessarily have to fully experience everything you experience in order for me to try to understand your perspective. And yet, because of the systems of coercion we have in place, autistics are expected to conform. Well, allistics are not expected to meet us unless it's convenient for them.
Has anyone heard of this before? Some yes, some no. Yeah, maybe sounds a little familiar. I remember when I first learned about it, talk about paradigm shift, right? Like it just completely turned me upside down because I was under this impression, I was starting to learn already about the misconceptions about autistic people not having empathy, right? And in my early days of ABA, when I was a behavior tech therapist, there wasn't even RBT back then, we were teaching emotions because we were told that autistic people don't have emotions, or they don't know how to express them or how to label them. And then, after talking to so many autistic people, realizing, no, this is a stereotype and it's not true. It's just that autistic people might have a different way of empathizing. Tara Vance talks about this a lot too. And the fact that the onus is being put on that autistic person to make that effort to change, it is totally unfair. It is one-sided. Why are they having to do all the work? And the non-autistic people just kind of sit back and judge and put people in boxes. And this shows up in different environments, like in the workplace.
Well, I was going to say, I see a lot of it in the school system. And, we learned about that on our trip to India. You spoke a lot about it, and it kind of piqued my interest. And I've been learning more about it. And, as an educator, I thought I was doing great, writing goals of, oh, they're going to make eye contact and they're going to participate in non-preferred conversations. And that's just a terrible idea. Why would we force that on somebody just to make it more socially acceptable? So I really appreciate you, Rachel, were the one who shared that with me.
Something to keep in mind about what we consider is mentally healthy in today's society per the DSM and those sorts of things is if you kind of break it down and you kind of do some tracing back. My first passion was history. Pattern recognition goes nuts on that. I love it. But polite society concepts, politeness, a lot of it is rooted in Victorian English mores. There's been some updates, but those updates are still heavily informed by it. But eye contact and it's not just any Victorian English, it's upper class and noble Victorian English. So having to have a conversation about something that you're not interested in feels very Jane Austen, doesn't it? Right? Direct eye contact. Look in my eyes, boy.
Yeah. I'm just saying, as an adult, as a neurotypical person, if I don't want to engage in a conversation, I'm not going to, because I don't want to talk about politics. So that's our human right. I don't understand why we would force somebody to talk about something that's not of interest to them. So that was just really eye-opening for me. And as my new role in the education system, I'm trying to help guide teachers in thinking more about that.
Love it. Thank you.
Marianne.
Hi. So I'm also a special education teacher and a BCBA. I work in a public school, middle school, and where I see it is between, and I don't know if it's just where I'm working, but between the general education teachers and the special education teachers. We have a very difficult time trying to navigate all the things that we need to do to support students because of our gen ed teachers. There's a lot of pushback. I don't know if you have any suggestions or from your expertise on how to work with people who are difficult or being difficult.
Carefully. Sorry. I was a behavior special ed teacher for 5 years at a middle school, and it was definitely a big old struggle to do that. I'm going to show you some pictures that come from my old classroom, because I think that having this as a visual along with the thing that I'm going to share will hopefully give you some ideas. So this is the adventure room. This is my old classroom. And the adventure room is a former closet. The only reason it's as big as it is because we had the shelves removed. It's teeny, teeny, tiny. And initially it was just, a special ed teacher put in the closet, whatever. But it turned out to be a plus because this was dead center of Canyon View Middle School. It was right next to the lunchroom. And when I had an opportunity to get a bigger room and they came and told me that I could get a bigger room, I said, nope, don't want it. Because this room and the skills room, which was next door with a little center spot in between, was my domain. And it was a place where my kids could come. And the theme of the adventure room was adventuring is hard. Adventuring is not fun sometimes. Sometimes it is. But adventuring takes a lot of work and a struggle. Come to this place where you can take a load off and you can rest and you can be safe. And the adventure room, the theme of it is right here on this poem, which you may not be able to read, but I can recite it for you. It's from The Hobbit. And it's the greatest adventure is what lies ahead. Today and tomorrow are yet to be said. The chances and changes are yours to make. The mold of your life is in your hands to break. The adventure room was about empowering the children to have a place that they could go to be safe. And no kid was excluded. They did not have to be a special ed student to come here. And I went back to this image because if you look down here in the corner, you'll see these grocery bags. I collaborated with the local food bank, and every day this room was left open and nobody was in there, and kids could come in and take what they needed. Because the adventure room was about having a safe place. And what happened was, and it was partly accident and partly by intent, but so much accident. What happened was that we shaped it into being a place where if a kid was struggling, they knew that instead of having to run away, they could just go to Mr. Middleton's room, right? To the adventure room. And initially we had a lot of pushback from teachers, but then eventually they started to see the difference. The mild, moderate special ed, behavior special ed crew, we had 100% inclusion. And the severe classroom was working on doing that as well. But the severe needs, if you will. My first 2 years, I had kids who were basically stay in this room, and that's it. They maybe go to one or two things, but all their education was in this room. Kids that were before would have been stuck here were now in a place where they could come and go as they please. And you'll notice these little shelves along the tops of the room. I regularly would change them up so that the kids had to look for new little things. I just made it fun and adventurous for them. And you'll notice that on the door on the left, there's a whiteboard. I would do quizzes and puzzles and little secret things and little trivia things. And because of that, and the feel and tone of the room, which was very modular, a lot of moving around, but because of the fact that it was a place that was invitational, where it was included, where they knew that they could come no matter what to be safe, we saw amazing things happen. And one of those amazing things is, here we go. So this is actually from a presentation, a keynote that I've done, and I want to do it again. The title is Greetings Humans, Why Feeling Like an Alien is Normal. But this case study that I like to reference is first contact in the hallway outside of class. I was walking to check on another one of my students, and I saw a kid come out of the classroom and drop to the floor and maybe say a curse word and start crying. He wasn't my student. That didn't matter. I saw someone was struggling, so I walked up. I sat down next to him. I just sat with him. And then after a little bit, I said, because he was crying and he's like, this is stupid. I said, I get that. Keep in mind, I've never interacted with this kid except in passing prior to this point. But then he started opening up to me and telling me how frustrated he was. Then the teacher, one of the teachers that I was my hardest sell, came out, and he looked at me and I was like, I'm just here to help. And the teacher started talking with him, and I listened, and I could see that it was definitely a double empathy problem situation. And I said to the teacher, hey, I'm right down at the end of the hall. Let's give this kid a name so that way I can refer to a name. Let's call him Dusty. It's a fun name, right? So Dusty, I said, Dusty seems like he's having kind of a hard time. And it just so happens that this period of time is when I have a study hall. I was just coming to check on another kid. Dusty can just bring his assignment down and get a little extra help. It's all good. He's like, we don't need approval for that. I'm like, as long as you're okay with it. We have 2 kids in study hall and happy to help another one. Absolutely no problem. And he can just come back as soon as the assignment's done. That kid started coming out of his shell. Before, when I finally got to know Dusty, I found out that he was very isolated and he was very much struggling, that he had maybe 1 or 2 friends, but they were in different classes than him. And it just wasn't like he just was having a hard time connecting. He came out of his shell. He started being a part of my biggest intervention or support, lunchtime. He'd come every lunchtime and hang out and be with the other kids. And we just be there, be people. And I loved lunchtime because it's an opportunity for conflicts to happen that we could show them how to resolve. I didn't try to stop conflicts. I didn't try creating them either. But what instead I do was I help show the kids how to work through it. And my aides, they were very flexible and they started learning how to take this approach as well. And it made a world of difference. Fast forward to Dusty's 8th grade experience. Dusty, my interaction with him started at 6th grade. I got this letter in my box, stamped. Dusty was given an assignment from his language arts teacher to write a letter to a hero of his. And if the person was alive and he had their address, to mail it. If not, then it was just that. But this is all the difference. And for those who are not watching the video or just getting the audio, the message is, Dear Mr. Middleton, I was recently asked to think of someone who impacted my life, and I thought that you would be a good choice. Your care and kindness helped me when I was struggling. You helped me get through when things were hard. When I was bullied and I told you, you told me it would be okay. You invited me to hang out in your room with the other boys who had gone through the same thing. Thank you so much for helping me. I hope you have a good day. I don't know if Dusty is neurodivergent. I don't care. I care that that little piece right there, that one little action of pausing made the difference. I care that he was humanized and his teacher was humanized. The enemy of humanity is dehumanization. And I appreciate the concepts of tolerance and acceptance. They're nice concepts, but they're stepping stones. They're not end points. We need to create society and places where people belong, not tolerated, belong. Does that mean we're all going to get along over? No, we're going to have conflict. And the reality is, as behavior analysts, we get stuck into and special ed teachers and general ed teachers, we get stuck into some of the hardest situations. Parents get stuck in some of the hardest situations. And there are people who experience very profound disabilities. They're profoundly disabled by rigid environments. And sometimes the environment, there's no helping it. There's some things we just can't do. We don't have the genie in the lamp. We don't have magical powers, and we don't have the capacity to transfer minds into new bodies and those sorts of things. So these are realities that we just have to deal with. But at the same time, if we maintain each other's humanity and we actively defend each other's humanity. I was raised in a household where the N-word was commonplace. I don't remember the first time I heard it. I was raised in a household where homophobic slurs were thrown about and where sexism was acceptable. I had to relearn how to see the world around me. I had to learn how to open up my perspectives and realize that whilst I may have experienced oppression and harm, I have also been an oppressor and caused harm. And one of the ways that helped me to counter condition that was my love of history and reading primary sources and reading the works of W.E.B. Du Bois, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, all the other amazing humans in the civil rights movement who did the work that they did helped me to break that conditioning and help me to start seeing people for who they are. And I stand on the shoulders of those giants. And to paraphrase Dr. King, if there's injustice anywhere, there's injustice everywhere. The injustice of the medical model system does not just impact autistics, it impacts nurses, doctors, behavior analysts, teachers, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, everybody in between. Is it possible to make it change overnight? Oh, God, I wish it was. But where real change happens is one heart and one mind at a time. Dusty and his teacher in that moment was my domino moment for them. Has anybody here heard of the word Sonder? Sonder? Oh, of course you've heard of it. It's a fairly new word. It comes from the Encyclopedia of Obscure Sorrows or something like, I can't remember the exact name, but the individual who coined it, I think his first name is John, I forgot his last name. He coined this word to describe a sensation, and that sensation is a sensation of the realization that a complete stranger or somebody that you meet just in passing has a unique and complex an experience and unique and complex a life as you, and that you are a secondary character in their life. Maybe I serve the role of the old wise old man for in Dusty's life. I hope he's doing well. I have lost contact. I don't know where he's at or what he's doing. But our actions have impact. Behavior does not come from nowhere. And when we invite people in and show them how to do that, even when they're going through hell, things change, and things change beautifully. Will we ever get the letters that I got from Dusty for all those interactions? Not necessarily. I was lucky. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about the pathology paradigm and we're talking about neurodiversity, this matters. Rachel, I'm going to jump into and explain neurodiversity, if that's okay.
Yeah. So, Brian, if you could explain neurodiversity and also what neurodiversity affirming means to you.
Yeah. So first, let's start with neurodiversity and what the originators of the term meant. Neurodiversity is the diversity of neurotypes. I like to expand on that by saying the diversity of neurobiological types, because neurology, we're not brains in a meat suit. It's all connected, right? So neurobiological types. And a good example of neurodiversity is, for reference, is biodiversity. So when referring to a tree by itself, that tree is not biodiverse. It's a tree, it's a single organism. But that tree with squirrels and insects and birds and lichen and grass underneath it and mycelia and mushrooms beneath the surface and ferns and plants, all that's a biodiversity right there. It's the idea that there's a little microbiome right there, and even not microbiome, even bigger. There's a complexity that exists for all these variations in biology. Well, neurodiversity is the idea that we are operating inside of a diverse biome of neurobiological types. And so I am not neurodiverse. Per the definition as it currently stands now, I am neurodivergent. And neurotypical and neurodivergent need to be understood in a binary. So the misconception of neurotypical is typically developing. That's incorrect. That's a drift. It's actually typically accepted neurobiological types. That's a very critical piece, because you could be diverse within neurotypicality. Obviously, everybody's different, right? Different preferences and all that. But it's typically accepted by the societal norms. And so neurodivergent is diverging from the typically accepted societal norms. Neurodivergent doesn't necessarily mean disabled. Synesthesia is a very common neurodivergence, and that doesn't necessarily disable an individual. So somebody can be neurodivergent and not be disabled. And yet divergence it's outside of the accepted norm. And so when we understand neurodiversity, neurotypical and neurodivergent, we realize that much like behavior analysis, it's conditional on the environment and how the environment impacts the organism. Then we start to expand in our understanding and seeing how this loops in. And of course, neurodiversity affirming practice or neurodiversity aligned practice would be practices that align towards affirming and creating environments where all neurobiological types can thrive so that we can coexist and collaborate together. I will add that I frequently have people ask me, well, is NET, natural environment training, neurodiversity aligned or affirming? Or is this particular procedure neurodiversity aligned or affirming? And so on and so forth. And my response every single time, and sometimes it shocks people, but I don't like, I want to make sure people understand. No, none of those are neurodiversity aligned or affirming, because those are neutral concepts. It's the attitudinal approach that we take. Now, in application, could a punishment procedure be neurodiversity aligned or affirming? It could be. I'll use an example. I mispronounce your name. You correct it. That's a punishment procedure. Correction is there's a reduction in future behavior. So it could be. There are other ways that it could potentially be neurodiversity aligned or affirming, potentially. But again, it's not the scientific principle that is, it's how it's applied. Is it matching up to that individual's needs? It's meeting them where they're at. It's individualization. It's social validity. So if there's any one thing in behavior analysis or any other behavior science that is perhaps neurodiversity affirming or aligning, it's the impetus, the requirement, the drive for us to verify and confirm social validity and then align services towards that. But even then, I wouldn't even say that is by itself neurodiversity affirming or aligned. I would say that's striving for it. It's not a destination. It's a journey. It's a process. It's something that I have to do regularly. So when I see people be like, we do neurodiversity affirming behavior analysis, I go, that's a nice tagline. That's a nice selling point, a marketing point, but this is not a selling point. This is a necessity. In some cases, for some people, it's life or death. And even then, it's like, maybe it's not life or death, but it's like suffer versus thrive. And so the question is, can we try to find that thrive point for each person? And it takes effort, and it's not easy, but like it's a process and a procedure. I hope that explains it a little bit and helps with understanding it within context.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Brian. Hey, Rachel here. Do you know anyone else who might benefit from this episode? Maybe a non-autistic person looking for better ways to communicate with their autistic loved one. I encourage you to share this episode if you'd like to help them out. And now, back to the conversation. What are some of your key takeaways from Brian's talk today? What things stood out to you that you're like, wow, I never thought about it like that. This is something new that I've just discovered. Or maybe you've heard it before, but now you're hearing it in a different way. Or maybe it's something that you're going to take with you and you're going to start applying to your own work. Maybe it's an attitude.
I have heard and know about some of the medical model versus social model paradigm, but just hearing the way you spoke about it today, it's definitely something I'm going to bring to my team and remind them about. I am the only BCBA on my team. I work with a lot of mental health counselors and social workers and psychologists who I think some people might assume would be better, but I feel like sometimes they're worse than us with their approaches and things. And they, have an autistic client and they're like, well, what do I do, Hailee? I'm like, everything you're doing is right, but just you need about 30 more sessions to see the progress, and that's okay. So, breaking that down for them. And I've talked about neurodiversity affirming practices, and I've talked a lot about the autism, acceptance movement, or as Brian beautifully said, the acceptance isn't enough, tolerating isn't enough, but a place where they belong. So it's something I've been trying to incorporate into my trainings and things more and more. But I think every time I see something or, hear a talk like this, it's just no, I'm not doing it. I'm not explaining it enough. There are more things that I can pull. And I think being able to pull from, an actual medical model is something that would be a bigger zinger to them. They like things explained as well, this is what the research says, and this is the model that we're looking at, versus me being this is what I've been reading, and this is a hot topic and things like that. So I'm really excited to bring it more towards them.
Well, and something to add in, because this is one of the areas where mental health struggles. So I'm a active aficionado. I love acceptance commitment therapy / training. And oftentimes people confuse ACT and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And it's because they have a lot of similarities. And it took me a very long time to figure out that even though there's a lot of similarities, there's some significant differences. And one of those significant differences, and one of the areas where behavior analysts and ACT therapists go wrong, is in the area of acceptance. See, we have a relational frame confusion that's happening. We confuse frequently acceptance with resignation. A lot of times the neurodivergent individual is experiencing these emotions that they're experiencing, their anger, their frustration, their anxiety, their depression. And the attitude is to pathologize the emotion, the experience. But the radical behaviorist and functional contextualist framework is these did not come out of nowhere. There's something going on. Now, sometimes that something going on is strictly neurobiological. Some people are born with the short end of the stick and they need a little bit of help chemically. Rarely is that the whole reality. It's very, very, very rare. Typically, it's a combination and there's a cyclical component going. And so when somebody is like, for example, anger management, acceptance commitment therapy, somebody's angry because something unjust happened. And it's just like, well, that's just how it is. You're just going to have to deal with it. You have to accept it. Why can't you accept this? Instead of looking at it from the ACT paradigm, the acceptance commitment therapy, the hexaflex is a part of contingency analysis. It's this weird attitude that it's separate is so odd to me because it's just like that's a mentalism that behaviorists have done with ACT. And yet when we're talking about diffusion, that's a process of being able to take a step back, sometimes literally. When we're talking about experiential avoidance, it's a process of realizing that the reason you're avoiding your experiences is because you're avoiding the pain or the struggle that comes with that. And sometimes we have to step into the thing that we're avoiding to be able to move through it. The reason present moment matters is because we're being able to be present so we can identify what's actually happening around us. Contingency analysis. Self as context matters because you need to be able to see yourself within that context. And I would propose, and I've heard a couple people start saying this now, so maybe it is getting back to people, or maybe it's convergent evolution. I don't care. I just want this idea out there. But I would propose that the sibling to self as context is others as context. So seeing the other person in their context as well as your own, because that's a part of the problem solving process. And then the acceptance piece is accepting that this is what's happening, but it's not resignation. It's this is what's happening right now. And acceptance can include this is an unjust situation, but it's still acceptance. And then the next step is committed action. What action can I take? Because resignation is you're done. You're just going to have to deal with it. But committed action is moving towards something. It's what steps can I take here and now? Who can I collaborate? What can I do? And of course, the direction that is critical to this, and it's at the start and the end of everything, is what are your values? What matters to you? And so ACT is contingency analysis. It's nonlinear contingency analysis. And a lot of times mental health counselors, because they're in the pathology paradigm, they're counseling this person and they're telling them, well, you just have to accept that this is how it is. And it's like, well, do they? Do they really?
They certainly do not. I think I see that a lot. It's easier if they can just resign. It's easier if we can just give them some medication and then move on. And so I think that's what I see a lot is they don't get a ton of training on how to work with people with autism or autistics or, anything, any, even just, ID or ADHD. And then they're like, well, it should be easier. I was told that it would look like this when I do therapy. And I'm like, well, it doesn't.
People are messy.
Yeah. So thank you so much for everything. You do have a beautiful way of speaking about all of these issues. So thank you so much. And for being so open with us as well and sharing such personal stories.
I blame it on my rumination. I'm really good at ruminating.
It's benefiting all of us.
It benefits me too. I actually, 2022 was the year that I finally got my official diagnosis for generalized anxiety disorder. And it was because I needed it. I was working at a place that was not being supportive, that was being very harmful. And I knew for the longest time that I had a lot of anxiety. It's just that the way that my anxiety expressed was more the acceptable assigned it male way of doing it. But when I got it, I went in and I filled out the whole questionnaire, and the doctor blinked and said, "How are you not crippled? Are you on any SSRIs?" Is that sort of stuff? And I'm like, "Well, doc, let me explain." And I broke it down for them, and they're like, "Well, I guess if it works for you," but I'm like, "Yeah, right now it's not working. I need help." So, but yeah, it's that reflective piece. And one of the reasons I don't think it's bad for us to continue using the term autism is that the original meaning of the term for autism, it came from, I think, the Greek of of self or self-reflective or in looking inward, something to that effect. And that's true to my experience. Like, I've had some very loving friends say, "Brian, you're just a creature of intellect." And I'm like, "No, but okay."
Well, I love your intellect and I love all of your sharing. I will say my takeaway is short but sweet is when you talk about neurodiversity not being a destination, it's a journey. And that really resonates with me because taking each person in as an individual and seeing what is best in that situation is really what we need to all be focusing on, not just rigid rules and this theory says this and that. It's really we've got to be pivotal in responding to what's needed. So thank you. That hits home for me.
Good. Something to go with that. I'm not an optimist and I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist. Because an optimist ignores all the data that does not match up to that perspective, and the pessimist ignores all the data that's not match up to that perspective. Realists, analytical realists, look at the whole picture and take into account both the worst case and the best case, the things that are happening. I used to jokingly say I'm a paranoid optimist, but I think analytical realist is probably a better one. Shannon.
I think my takeaway from this is like, we think about all of these concepts, we can get really hung up on the all of the terminology, and really what we're doing is just treating people like humans. And I think that has a wider impact in terms of we could take what we were talking about here in terms of being neurodiversity affirming, but then applying these same concepts, we can be more culturally safe. We can be more accepting in different environments. I actually work at a center where we don't require a diagnosis, any kind of developmental support need. So we don't really talk about diagnosis very much, which is kind of interesting. But we do talk about the medical and social model a lot because we work with Indigenous populations here, and that medical model is super harmful to a lot of cultures as well. So I think kind of ruminating in the back of my mind was okay, how can I take what I'm learning in a lot of my experience has been in the kind of autism world, right? And now how can I apply those same concepts to just meet other people where they're at and what they need? So that's kind of my takeaway today.
Thanks, Shannon.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Brian. Every time that I hear your stories, it's like you have more and more and more. And I'm like, wow, every time is just amazing. And, you have so many interesting things to share. As I said before, I thank you for sharing. Thank you for being vulnerable and opening up with us and just taking everything in and taking it away. And I really appreciate when you said, when you're talking to other people, whether they're, oh, is it a puzzle sign? Is it this? Is it that? And teaching them and showing the growth. That's something that really stuck with me, especially during this month. There are so many conversations that are going to come up. So that was something that really stood out to me. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Brian, as always, you're amazing. And I also just want to acknowledge everyone else on this call for being here and for being curious. This is a movement, and it takes shakers like you guys to move it forward. We talk a lot about the history of ABA, and this is the future. We are creating the path for the future generations of BCBAs, of autistic people in the communities, in the world. And you just get really present to that. that you're making a difference already just by listening and taking whatever Brian is sharing and spreading it to your coworkers, the families you work with, just the mindset shift. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for tuning in to Autism Knows No Borders. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with one person who you think will find value in it too. By doing so, you'll be helping us to improve access to autism services around the world. Thanks for listening. Take care.